There is a place that is spoken about only in whispers, a dark area that spawns the beginnings of urban legends, a place where anything can happen and usually does. During the light of day it hides just outside of view, but when the sun goes down, spirits, creatures of the night roam free, and things do go bump in the night. It is in every state and every country, and there is no escaping it, no matter how safe you feel behind your locked doors and latched windows. So we invite you to turn down the lights and turn up your radio while we join Dave Schrader and Tim Dennis, your hosts, on a journey into the darkness on the edge of town.
Hello and welcome. It's Wednesday, and you're tuned into the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Tomorrow, Timothy Renner joins us. We're going to talk about these strange historic accounts of Bigfoot, wild men, and other monsters. And he has got some amazing historic accounts that he has collected for his new book, over 200 pages in the new book, and stories going back into the early 1800s, all the way through to the 1920s, just in this first volume. And we're going to hear some of these original historic texts, so it's great. Check out that show tomorrow. Then on Friday, we're going to take a visit to the Museum of Shadows in Elmwood, Nebraska. Nate and Kaylee Ratterman will be our guests. We'll hear about their haunted items and some of the possessed possessions and artifacts that they have in their haunted museum. The building itself, a 127-year-old building that was once used for embalming. The history in the building alone is enough to frighten you. Speaking of frightening buildings, our topic tonight, very interested, the haunted Harlequin Theater, ghostly experiences behind the scenes. And our guest tonight, I'm really excited to have join us and share her stories and encounters with us. I have had a great pleasure of knowing Nikki personally and traveling with her and her husband and our friends as we go from different country to different country, investigating claims of the haunted areas that we've gone to: Scotland, Ireland, Germany, Prague, this year England. And it's always great to be with them. We've had some of the most bizarre encounters together, and she has finally taken the step forward. We're very proud of her. She's written her first book, The Haunted Harlequin Theater, Ghostly Experiences Behind the Scenes. Welcome to Beyond the Darkness, Nikki Folsom. Nikki, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Dave.
This is exciting stuff. Nikki, I've been hearing about this haunted theater for a few years from you, and I'm so glad you finally decided to put pen to paper and share these stories.
Yeah.
I want to introduce you to our audience, though, and give them a little bit of a background on you. Now, have you always been a believer in the paranormal?
I have. Well, I would say up until I was 5 years old, I was not a believer. When I was 5, I saw my first apparition, and that's when I became a believer.
But when you were 5, and you remember that?
I remember that, believe it or not. It was one of those experiences that's stuck in your brain and just doesn't go away. It happened in the middle of the night, and I grew up in Pennsylvania, about 20 minutes outside of Gettysburg, and I woke up in the middle of the night to a noise in the hallway, and I looked up and I saw a soldier walk past my bedroom door. So that can be startling for a young child. So that's what happened.
That could be startling for an old child like your husband Eric or I, and if there's no Jameson involved at that point, it really is unnerving. So you saw a soldier walk by in your home. Now, did the soldier notice you, or was it like on its way to battle or wherever it was going in a kind of a residual effect?
Well, as an adult, I can look back now and think it was residual because I saw it twice. It went past the door and then came back past. But at that time, I can still remember what it looked like. He had a dark jacket, he had light pants, dark boots, and he had what looked like crisscross, like cloth across his chest, which could have been bullets or ammunition now that I look back. But the one thing that stood out to me was he had a rifle with a knife on it. And at 5, I had no idea what that was. Well, now I know it's a bayonet, but back then I had no idea. And knowing that I was that close to Gettysburg, and the older I got, I realized, oh my gosh, that's what it was.
Did you ever talk to neighbors? Did anybody else have these experiences that close to Gettysburg?
I never talked to them about that type of stuff. I just didn't think about it. And I guess I was so little, I didn't really think about it. Of course, as I got older,
right.
I did. We started talking, I guess, when I was 9 or 10. That's when we started to play with Ouija boards and light as a feather, stiff as a board, and do all that crazy stuff with kids. And we had our own experiences with that too.
Well, now, did you tell your family or anybody about that experience? And how did they react to it when you did?
Great question. So I told my mom, because when you wake up in the middle of the night, you start screaming and, mom comes running. And she just calmed me down. It was a nightmare. You're fine. It's okay. Go back to sleep. And, that's usually what moms say. You're good, so that they can get back to sleep because they have work the next day. But yeah, I told her about it. And as I got older and I started to play with Ouija boards, she had a fit about that. Don't put that stuff in my house. So obviously you don't tell them when you're playing with it anymore. So she'll hear this and be ready to kill me, but
don't worry. We'll edit it out. You just feel free to tell me everything and anything. And I most likely will pull all of the bad stuff out. Don't worry about it, Nikki. It's our secret.
Well, I tell you, I stopped playing with Ouija boards because I was downstairs in the basement, as always, and playing with a friend of mine, and we were both sitting crisscrossed on the floor, and the Ouija board was on both our knees. It was shared on both sides, and it started to lift off our knees when we were playing with it. That was the last time we ever touched it. I threw it in the air. We went running out the back door, and that was the last time I ever touched the Ouija board. But that's not the last time I tried to talk to spirits, and you'll laugh at how I did it. But what's interesting is back then, in the late 70s, early 80s, there weren't TV shows and things like that for us to look at and say, oh, cool, let's go try this. I was, as a kid, was using my dad's lawnmower, who was outside, and it was like, I was using that as my white noise and recording and trying to talk to the ghost to hear it through the lawnmower. How strange is that, right?
So you're out pushing the lawnmower. And the whole time you're like, give me a sign of your presence.
Well, he's busy, so he's not going to know what I'm doing.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just, looking back now, I think, wow, if I would have just paid attention to what the heck I was doing. But it was interesting.
Now, you're so matter of fact about it. You had a Ouija board levitate.
I did.
And were you in the middle of communicating when it levitated? Was it just the start of the session? What happened?
That's a great question. I cannot only thing I remember is it started, the planchette started to move, and I don't know what we were saying or how we were saying it. I just remember it started to lift off both our knees, and my friend Christy was on the other side of me, and we looked at each other, our mouths dropped, and I smacked it up, and so it was spinning in the air, and we just took off running outside. So
up to that moment, did you kind of think maybe Christy was moving the planchette? Did she think maybe Nikki was moving that planchette? Was there always in the back of your mind that concern that maybe this wasn't really ghostly?
Yes. Oh yeah. Because, clearly somebody's doing this. And then when that happens, oh, nobody's doing this.
Right. When it starts to levitate, that was kind of your holy grail moment, right? It was, now you're realizing that this is so much more than just two girls having fun and who's pushing what. This actually takes it to a whole new level.
It does.
All right.
Well, and it wasn't just that in that house. We had shadows in the house. And what's interesting is I was looking at these shadows and interacting with these things when I was little, but I didn't realize that my parents were seeing these same shadows until years and years later, after I had moved out. That's when I realized they were seeing the same ones.
Oh, really? So you were seeing shadow people there as well?
Yeah. And
now, do you think that it was your dabbling with the evil Ouija board that opened this portal and brought the dark shadow people in, or were the dark shadow people always there?
It could be a combination. It could be a combination.
You just don't want your mom to hear this interview and think it's your fault. I can hear it already in your voice, Folsom.
No. I think what it might have been is they were there, but they didn't decide to show themselves until I started playing with things I should have been playing with.
Gotcha. All right. So what were the encounters that your family members were having?
What I used to do when I was little is I would sit in the basement and I would look up the stairs, and it was like a bus station. You could just see shadow figures moving everywhere, little, tall. I mean, it was like a bus station, for lack of a better description. Well, come to find out, upstairs, you could also see them. You could be watching the TV in the living room, and it was like they came up the stairs and walked through the house. So you could see them out of the corner of your eye. And when you looked there, it's like you're crazy because it's not there. So I was like, okay, I'm not seeing it. Well, my mom and dad were actually seeing the exact same thing. They would watch TV and they'd actually have to move from one chair to the other because they couldn't stand seeing that out of the corner of their eye.
Oh, really? Yeah, they wouldn't tell you. Did they ever do anything, call in priests or do prayer or anything to try to alleviate themselves of seeing this, or they just changed position so they didn't have to see it?
They just changed positions. Well, and we had crosses and we prayed. We're a Christian family, so we prayed. But I actually had a time in my life where we had something messing with our kids when we lived in Maryland, and I had a blessed cross and holy water and a lot of maternal anger, and I went after a spirit. And after I took all those things to it, it never showed itself again. At least to us, we moved, but but it never showed itself again.
All right, I want to hear more about your experiences, and I know you told me a very impactful story regarding you and your family and a loss that took place, an unfortunate murder that happened. But before we get to that, you and I had a chance to investigate a few years ago in a couple of castles, and it was in Ireland, I believe, wasn't it, where they were going to show us the art of table tipping.
Yes. And
glass scrying. And of course, we are hyper intelligent Americans, and this just is all balderdash and shenanigans to us, right? And this just sounds like something out of a carnival. And were you doing the table tipping when that table started galloping around the room, or were you part of our group in the basement when we were just hearing the thumping taking place?
I was with you in the basement.
Right. So we saw some of the weird stuff that happened with the table tipping, but our hands were not on the table at the time it took off running. But you did glass scrying.
Yes.
And I know your husband, Eric, and I kind of stood back. It was mostly women. I think one of the guys, and there was a big tabletop built kind of like a Ouija board, right? There was a yes, no, and some numbers. Mm-hmm. And you all put your one fingertip on this glass on the table. And you would start asking questions, and this glass would start swirling around the table and go to numbers and letters and yes and no and answer. And to Eric and I, it looked silly and ridiculous in all accounts. And I told your husband, I said, go in there and see what's going on. And he gives me the thumbs up because I didn't want to taint it with my negativity. So I sent your husband to taint it with his negativity. But what I thought was really cool. Now explain, before Eric did this, you've got your finger on the glass. Are you guys pushing hard on the glass, or is it like you're barely touching the lip of the glass or the bottom of the glass with your fingertips?
We're barely touching it. It's just resting on it at best. And that's the craziest part is even if we would have tried to move the glass, we wouldn't have been able to based on how lightly we were holding it.
And this is where I thought it was really intriguing is you guys were almost kind of chasing that glass around the table. Mm-hmm. As it's zipping around. Eric goes in there and does exactly what I was hoping he would do. We kind of freshen it up, and everybody puts their finger down, and he jams his finger on that glass because he's going to hold that glass in place and see who's tugging it to see which direction it would go. And that was one of the most classic moments I've ever had because I'm standing there watching your husband's face when this glass starts taking off, and he's looking at me like, what the hell is going on here? And finally, when we get over there, I go, what was it? He goes, Dave, I couldn't push it down. I was trying to shove this glass to the ground, and it would just keep flying around the board. You couldn't stop it. So that was really intriguing. I mean, did that kind of change your paradigm? Because it really shifted me, and especially trusting Eric and you and some of the other participants of this board. That was something I'd never witnessed before. Yeah,
that was one of the coolest things I've ever been a part of. I love that because I felt you're talking to another person. You're not talking to this scary thing. It's like another person there. And it was the coolest thing for me. And to have Eric do it, it's great because he is super skeptic, or Mr. Skeptic. But the other experience he had with you was one of the first trips we took when we were in Scotland, and he heard you get the EVP that said darkness, and he was right beside you when you got it, and he came back and he was like, no one said anything. Right. No one said anything. So that was awesome for me to see too, because
we'd gone into the Edinburgh vaults, right? The vaults, and we were down there, and they're telling the story, and then they kind of sprung it on us. Oh, you guys can go investigate, but we hadn't brought any tools to investigate. We thought we were just on a walking tour. So he hands us some K2 meters, and all I had on me was my phone. So I stepped into one of the vaults and flipped on my phone, and I think there were only 4 or 5 of us in that room, and we were all standing in a circle, and, I did a quick EVP session. But what was really interesting, when I first start the recording, nobody's speaking. We're just all standing there in a circle. This voice comes over, and you hear it go, darkness. And then I'm like, did you used to live here? Did you work here? We're getting no response, but it's like they were acknowledging, who we were. We were with the darkness group, and this voice comes straight out, darkness. That was cool. And then your husband also, though, when we were in Ireland, he's the one that when we were involved in one of the prisons, they have the ghost stories, but they're telling the historical significance of this old prison. And there's one cell that's known to be very active, and they allow you in there. And we were in trying to get EVP, and there were tour groups right behind us. And Eric goes, no. And he slammed the door, and he's like, listen, we only have a few seconds. You've got to answer us. We need to know, blah, blah, blah. And I think we asked 3 questions. That's all the time we had. And one of the questions we asked was, were you a guard here? Were you imprisoned here? Whatever. And we play it back and immediately get this guttural voice go, yes. And that was awesome, too, to be there and witness that in this group, because we had very little time, and Eric took the bull by the horns. And he stated, we don't have time to mess around. Use us now. And they did. That was really cool, and I loved watching him flip out about that, too. So but I was really interested in that glass scrying aspect of it, because that was really bizarre to me to see that. And you're going to be a part of the trip when we go to England this year.
Yep.
And you'll be out there presenting at the Sage Paracon that takes place in England too. So maybe you should tell listeners what's going on with that and how they can see you for our English listeners and European listeners, where you're going to be and what you're doing.
Well, yeah, I'm actually going to be doing a book signing over there. So I'm really excited. It's Sage Paracon. It's September. I'll be there September 23rd. I'll be there the night of the 22nd, the day of the 23rd. And I'll be signing books available, talking to you, asking questions, or answering questions, whatever anybody needs. Taking pictures,
That's great. Yeah, and it should be a fantastic time. So come on out there. And August, we sold out of that September England trip like lickety split. I mean, that was amazing to me how fast that blew out. We had to add a second program. We're going to be going out to England in August, our British invasion first wave. We do have some seats that are still available, so you're hearing the kind of things we get to do on these trips. If you're interested, go check out darknessevents.com, and sign up to be a part of that trip with us as well. Now let's go back into some of your personal stories and accounts. And I don't want to throw you a curveball. That's why I asked you off air if this was a story you were comfortable with, because I know this was a tragedy that kind of happened to you and your family. And are you okay with telling us a story?
Oh yeah, it's a very close to our family. But one of the great things about the folks we lost, Rebecca and Sammy, is they stood for just love. So it's being able to share experiences with the heart of it being just love. So this story is, as sad as it is, it's almost uplifting for Ashton, my daughter too. But I guess it was 2011, I think this happened. I can't believe it's been this long. We tragically lost Rebecca and Sammy. Sammy was one of Ashton's best friends, and they were killed, and then their house was set on fire. And Ashton was so excited the week before this happened, because she and Sammy had organized a sleepover at our house, and they were going to have so much fun and do blah, 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 what kids do. And The day that we found out everything that occurred, I had to go pick up Ashton at school. Eric was out of town, and I had to pick her up at school, bring her home, and tell her what had happened. And the whole way home from school, all she talked about was Sammy coming over and spending the night and how all the things they were going to do. And my heart just kept breaking and breaking. As we get home, we get on Skype with Eric to talk to Ash, to fill her in on what's going on. And she was absolutely devastated, as we all were, because these beautiful balls of light and energy were just stolen from us. And she was just devastated. So we got Eric off the phone. I'm trying to get Ashton calmed down and ready for bed. And I had gone in the bedroom to get everything ready. And Ashton was trying to get our dog to come in the room. And he was staying in the kitchen, and we have a motion light in the kitchen that just happened to be off. Well, Chris, like I said, the dog's in the kitchen, so Ash is yelling for him. And all of a sudden he walks through, the motion light pops on, and all I hear is Ashton come flying in the room screaming. And she told me that Sammy's there. And I'm like, what? And she said, Sammy, as soon as the motion light popped on, Sammy was standing there waving to me and smiling at me. And I said, Ashton, that's a gift. She came back to you to tell you she's okay. She's good. That's huge. It's amazing, because it takes forever for people to come through and give you that validation that they're okay. I've waited forever for my grandmother to come through to tell me. And I know you're waiting for your mom to come through. So for her to get that within 24 hours of this tragic event, to say, I'm okay, I'm still with you, I'm good. It was just such a great way for her to say, just keep on loving, just love, It was good. It was good. It was a good thing for me, I felt.
Right. And this is, I mean, that's so impactful to have an experience like that, and especially your daughter. And as you said, that kind of unnerved her at first.
It did.
Did she ever come to terms with the idea that, she received a gift that a lot of people would absolutely love to have happen? She did.
The thing with Ashton is she's been seeing what she calls, in quotes, the people since she was little, when she started talking. So I could write a whole book on Ashton. But I think when she saw Sammy, it was somebody that she knew to be alive, not somebody that she ever knew not to be. You know what I mean? Everybody else that she had seen up until that point, she had never known as being a living person.
Right.
But Sammy was a living person that transitioned. So it was kind of a cool thing for her. And it's funny. I tried to calm her down after she saw Sammy, and we got in bed, and, I'm trying to talk her to walk her into this meditation to say, okay, you're on the beach and you're sitting there, and Sammy's going to join you, and you're going to be able to talk and catch up. And as I'm talking, she's like, okay, be quiet. And she drifted off to sleep. So hopefully she was sitting on the beach in her dream talking to Sammy in a meditation.
Yeah, it was a remarkable gift for her to hear. But so your daughter had the ability, and has since very young, of seeing and witnessing things. Has that been frightening to her before, or did she realize that, in her world, everybody could see this?
I think she thought in her world everybody could see it. I can remember she was probably 3, maybe 3.5. We were out by the pool when we were living in Austin, and Eric and I were sitting at the table, and Ashton came up and said, I like you guys better than my other parents. And Eric and I just looked at each other and looked at Ashton, and she said, yeah, my mother and father and brother and sister died in a fire. And we were like, okay. And then she just skipped away like it was nothing. And Eric and I are like, oh my God. Okay.
Have you ever thought of taking her through like a regression to see what she might remember from a past life, or has she gotten further past that where you think she might not be able to communicate with that aspect of her world again?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about doing it. I guess we could consider it. She still sees things. We still watch her. She knows when something's around. She'll put her hands over her ears because she doesn't want to hear it. When we were in Edinburgh, on that tour where we went into I can't remember the Greyfriars Kirk, but it's the very far back. I can't remember the name of it, but
right. It was the Greyfriars Cemetery there where we went in where the nasty poltergeist was known to exist.
Yes. I don't know if you knew this was happening when we were in there, but Ashton had to stay with the tour guide because something grabbed her hair and she kept holding her ears, and the tour guide had to talk to her the whole time to distract her so that she wouldn't feel it, see it, any of it.
No, I think I was too much imbibing in Jameson prior to that to be worried about what your daughter was going through at that moment. No, that was an amazing time and opportunity out there. So, yeah, I didn't even realize she had gone through that. So something was yanking on her hair that whole time. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, your boneheaded husband and I were walking around doing EVP work, totally not protecting her. That's great.
Well, what's funny is Ashton's the person where she's not going to come out and tell you all this stuff is happening unless it's really freaking her out. And that was really freaking her out. So she went to the tour guide.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Very cool. So now this is where the story starts to come together for what we're going to discuss for the remainder of the show. Both you and your daughter are very active in theater and love acting. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about the Harlequin Theater and its history, before we start getting into the haunting aspect.
Okay. Well, the Harlequin was built, it was a World War II era building. It was built in 1943. It was built as an NCO and converted to an NCO annex after the new NCO club was built, which I don't remember the year of that, but it was later than that.
What is an NCO for those of us that are clueless?
Non-commissioned officers club. So this is where they go for their drinks and meetings and parties and whatever they want to do. They had bars in there. That's what the officers could go in and have drinks. So they had all kinds of things in there they could go do. But in 1974, the annex was shut down and it was converted to a music hall, which it offered musical instruments to soldiers in soundproof modules so that it's kind of a distressor. So, you play the trumpet, you go in and you go into the soundproof room and, for an hour you can just forget about everything else and play the music, which I think was fantastic that they did that. But then in 1975, it actually became the Harlequin Dinner Theater. And it's been the Harlequin Dinner Theater ever since, except for, I think it was 2015 that we took away the dinner, and now it's just the Harlequin.
Okay. And now, were there mysterious deaths or suicides, anything like that associated with this theater?
When you're dealing with the government, it's hard to find those types of things out. And you kind of have to dig and dig. Obviously, there's no records of anything like that. The closest thing I could find was in the 60s. One of the corporals, I believe it was, or something, was caught stealing cigarettes. So that's the only thing that was even remotely close to bad that I could find with the building. But it is the grounds that the Fort Sam Houston sits on. Their Indians were all over the grounds there before, I guess, Texas became a state, and then the U.S. government or the U.S. Army took over the land.
So certainly it's rich in history, just the property itself.
Oh yeah, even Geronimo was held there for 30 days in 1886. So it's got a lot of history.
All right. Well, let's do this. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll start with the Haunted Harlequin Theater and what type of experiences have been taking place there. Our guest this evening, Nikki Folsom. She's the author of The Haunted Harlequin Theater, Ghostly Experiences Behind the Scenes. We'll be back. We've got more coming your way here on the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.
Beyond the Darkness.
All right, we're back. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about this great historic accounts of Bigfoot, wild men, hairy creatures, and other monsters There are some great stories our guest, Timothy Renner, has been able to cull from newspaper archives dating back into the early 1800s, all the way through the 1920s, and some of the most fascinating accounts you guys are going to have to hear. It's great. That's tomorrow with Timothy Renner. Friday, we'll take a look at the Museum of Shadows in Elmwood, Nebraska, as we talk about these haunted artifacts and objects, the stories behind them, and some of the bizarre things they've gotten, dolls, shrunken heads, Ouija boards, and more. We'll cover that on Friday, plus a brand new Theater of the Mind. Our guest tonight is Nikki Folsom. Her book, The Haunted Harlequin Theater, Ghostly Experiences Behind the Scenes. Now, we heard a little bit about the history of the location and the building itself. And Nikki is here with us for the remainder of the show. All right, Nikki, let's get launched into the next part of this. How long into being there did you start to hear these stories of it being haunted?
I think we heard them initially as soon as we walked in, because we started in 2009. One of Ashton's friends, Samantha, brought her down for a summer camp. And as soon as we walked in, we got to know people. Within a couple weeks, couple months, we started hearing stories. But I'm that person that unless I have seen it, I don't really believe anything. But once it started happening to us, that's when everything started to become real, I guess. And I've been trying to think, there's so many things that have happened since 2009, and I'm trying to think, what was the first one? And it's one of two, and I think it was the bruises that I got was the first thing that occurred. I was up in the rehearsal room. There's a rehearsal room upstairs, and it's kind of the staging area for costumes, kind of getting it all together, make sure we have everything for each of the cast members before we take it downstairs to set it for the show. And the cast had gone downstairs. They were rehearsing, and I was upstairs working by myself for quite some time, and walked back downstairs because I don't remember if I wanted a drink. I don't remember what it was, but I went downstairs and I was talking to some of the cast members, and one of the guys said, "What is on your arm?" And I looked down to my left bicep, and it looked like there was an imprint of 4 fingers like somebody had grabbed my arm. And I mean, just like that. It wasn't there when I was up there before. It was just crazy. And I bruise easily, but not like that.
Right. And you never felt something grab onto your arm?
Not at all. I didn't feel anything grab me. I didn't feel uncomfortable. And normally I feel like I can tell if something's like just doesn't feel right, but I didn't feel that at all. So nobody pulled you aside and said, "Nikki, is everything okay at home? Are you safe?" No. Thank you, Eric. They know him, so they know he's happy-go-lucky. But what was interesting, Dave, is the next day when I went down to work, on the costumes, Ashton came with me, and she went upstairs with me. And she's not a fan of being upstairs by herself, but she was listening to her music and kind of reading her book, so she was fine. And I ran downstairs. I went to go down for 30 seconds to grab something and come right back up. And you know me, and there's nothing that occurs that takes me 30 seconds. I get distracted so easily. So it might have been 3 minutes. I might have been talking, just who knows. And all of a sudden, Ashton came tearing down the stairs and into the lounge. And we looked at her, we're like, "What's wrong?" And just the look on her face. And I happened to look at her arm, and her left bicep had the exact same fingerprints on her that I had. And of course, I didn't think to take pictures at that time. I just didn't. But at that point, I was mad because now you're touching my child. Don't do that. So I don't know what it was that touched us. I don't know who. I don't know if they were angry. I don't know if they were trying to get our attention. But that was one of the first things that happened that really grabbed my attention.
The idea that something's going on there, you guys are having this happen to you. Once it starts happening to you, do people start coming forward and telling you about their experiences there? Mm-hmm.
Yes. And what's interesting is there's so many different types of experiences and they occur so often that the folks I was talking to gather the stories or the collections for the book, we would talk, like a friend of mine, Johnny, and I went to lunch, and he would tell me a story of something that happened, and I was like, "Shut up, that happens to me too." And it's just crazy. And this is just a small group of people. So over the course of, 40 some years, how many times has this happened to other people that we just don't know about? So it's crazy. But there's a lot
but
of
nobody else had experiences where they had been touched or bruised or injured at all?
people have been touched more times than I can count, but I don't have any other record. I don't think I have any other stories that were given to me about people being bruised. I will tell you this though, when we were in Ireland, Sean, one of the managers there, he manages and creates all the musicals. Sean actually texted me a picture of his neck because he was sitting after a show had closed, or not sitting. He was cleaning up the bar area and he was talking to Susie, another friend of ours, and all of a sudden he felt this pain on his neck, and he showed it to Susie and she said, "It's just red." And he was like, "That's really weird," because he wasn't touching his neck. Nothing was itchy. And the next morning he woke up and there was a huge scratch on his neck. So, and it's in the book. There's a picture of it in the book. And it's just crazy that I don't know if it was mad at him or what, but he got a scratch.
All right. Do we have any idea of what it might be or why it is there?
Yes. And we know this information not because of history, but because of mediums that have walked through. I'd like to get another medium to walk through because it's been many years since someone's gone through. But some of the mediums have indicated that there's a little girl there. There used to be a little boy there, and I have stories about that. But there used to be a little boy, but he crossed over. One of the mediums escorted him into the light, so he's crossed over. There's a Native American. There's somebody we call the bartender, for lack of a better description. He just hangs out in the lounge and he's got a white shirt and black pants. So we call him the bartender. There's a lady upstairs that used to be a volunteer at the theater. Her name's Minnie, but the little girl that saw her calls her the lady in the green dress. There's a very nice man. He's a gray-haired man. And every time I run sound for the musicals, he's always standing and watching the show over my left shoulder. And then as soon as I turn to look, he's not there. There's an invisible woman. We hear her talk all the time. There's the man I saw upstairs. There's a shadow person.
Wait, now again, you kind of motor over it, just matter of fact. And then there's an invisible woman, and we hear her talk all the time. And then we did this. Nikki, what are you hearing? What is it? What are they saying?
Okay, so I'll tell you a story about this woman. We hear her names all the time, but this woman specifically, we hear a lot. And no one's ever seen her. But one of my experiences with her, I was upstairs, and upstairs there's an office and a little area kind of outside the office that they used to use for auditions. And, over the course of time, there were lots of plays laying out there and paper and just all kinds of things that needed to be tidied. So I was up there cleaning up one day. And I remember this distinctly because I had Janis Joplin playing. I think it was me and Bobby McGee playing. And I didn't have it too loud, but I had it loud enough that I could hear it and kind of hum along with it. And I heard this voice, and it just basically was, I'm going to try to imitate it, but it was, it was like a mumble, but there was no breathing. She didn't stop. And
that almost sounds like a recorder playing backwards or on fast.
Yes, that's exactly what it sounds like. And so I heard it. Then I ignored it. It stopped. I turned my music up a little bit more so that, maybe it was something outside and I just didn't recognize it. So after working a little bit longer, I hear it again. It's a little louder. I'm like, and at this point I'm just irritated. And I stopped the music and I said, if you're going to say something, you're going to have to slow down so I can understand you. Silence. So I'm like, all right, turn the music back on, turn it up a little more. Few minutes later, now she comes full force. And at that point, the hair on my arm started to stand up. I knew it was a warning to get me out of there. I think she was trying to say, leave, leave, leave. But at least that was the intensity I was getting from her, what I was kind of feeling she was saying. And I was like, okay.
Did you tell her next time, can you just say leave, leave, leave?
No, I just said, okay, I got it. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. So I don't know what was there. I don't know. I don't know, but she got me to leave and I left. And there's more than one person and more than one occasion where people have felt the female and male presence upstairs kind of go to battle and kind of defend people up there. It's so strange to explain, but that's that's my experience with her. But Robert has heard her when he's in the light booth. He's heard her in the box office. Same thing. Just keeps talking and mumbling and no breathing. Just that's the sound. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, exactly. Now you've gotten mediums that have come through and given you impressions and information, but I need to know, have you guys been able to track any of this information to historic significance and relevance to who these people may be?
No, not a single one. Oh, besides Minnie, besides the volunteer that used to be there, because we have her portrait there. But other than her, no. But there's one thing, and I'm going to tell you, Dave, I call it the creature for lack of a better description. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like alienish, animalish. It's strange. You hear he lives in the grid, which is it's like the area above the house where the lighting is, the air conditioning, kind of all that area, where you crawl space and all that good stuff. But I don't even know what it is to be able to give it a name of something. And Johnny and I at lunch one day, he was telling me he has seen it as well. I've heard it growl. I took a picture of it, but it's on an old phone and I cannot find the phone to get the picture off. As soon as I find it, I'm releasing it so everybody can see it, but I just don't have it. But Johnny pulled this thing up he Googled it. There's a movie called, I think it's Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. And Katie Holmes, I think, was in it. It was a remake. And there's creatures in this film that look exactly like that thing looks. I don't even know how to describe it. It looks like an alien head. It's like a cream color with these almond looking eyes. It's just weird as hell, and it growls.
Okay. Wow, that's not terrifying much. It's time to burn the old girl down to the ground, Nikki.
No, because I definitely, there are things that are there that scare the heck out of me, but there are things that are there that are things that are super nice and I want around, like the little girl. She's a sweetheart. There's Katie, one of the girls that performs with us, her little niece, Violet, came into the theater to see her. This was at the past Christmas show. And she's the cutest little thing. I think she's 5. And she was just, everywhere she goes, she's just a ball of energy. She just, boop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doo. And after the Christmas show, her Uncle Marcus was trying to chase her around the room to keep her in one space. And she kept running to the stairs and looking up in the dark upstairs and waving at something. And Marcus said, "What are you looking at? What are you doing?" And she said, "The little girl up there wants me to come play with her." She's 5. So she has no idea that there are stories like this. And it was kind of cool that she saw her, and she's not mean. The little girl actually followed me home one night. We used to have a kids group, and the kids, they get excited, and they'd be dancing and singing and doing all kinds of fun things. And we came home, everybody's in bed. It was middle of the night, and I sat straight up in bed because I heard a little girl scream with "Yee!" Like she was so excited and wanted to play. And it scared the hell out of me because I didn't know what it was. I knew it wasn't my kids, but it was right in my ear. And immediately I sat up. I knew within seconds what it was. And I was like, "You can't be here. You've got to stay at the theater. You can't be here." And she's never followed me home since.
But you like these spirits. You're friendly with them. If you feel this is an okay ghost, why would you tell her to go?
Because I don't want her to come to the house. I'm cool if you want to be at the theater. That's awesome. Don't come in the house. You know what I mean? I've got enough stuff here to deal with. I don't need that because there's other stories we could go into another time. But there's so many. Like I said, the man that looks over my shoulder during musicals, he's a sweet, sweet man. I could just tell by his energy that he's not there to harm anyone. He's just there to watch and enjoy. It's kind of cool. It's just, now there's things there that, like the creature, that aren't good. Like backstage, there's a shadow person. And in the book, there's a picture of this shadow person. And Robert showed me the picture, and the only reason I included it in the book because I looked at that picture and I was just taken aback because, oh my God, that's what we see backstage. And I'll tell you an example of what happened with Ash. I mean, it's happened to all of us, but Ashton was changing, or she was doing costume stage management for one of the shows, Doo-Wop, a couple of years ago. And she was helping Celie change her clothes. And the entire cast was on stage. Robert was in the light booth and I was at the soundboard. And Ashton looked across the backstage and there was a shadow man looking back at her from the other side of the stage. She could see nothing but his eyes. They were red. That's all she saw. That's all she saw.
Yeah, red eyes, that's never good. Unless it's early in the morning or after Daddy's been drinking. That's the only time red eyes are acceptable.
Right? Well, then the other thing is the I hate when I forget what I was going to talk about. The other thing with this shadow guy is it's like he wants to scare you. And like Florence, one of the ladies that worked there from 1975 until 2009, she went backstage one time during the day and she didn't see him, but she could feel him. She knew he was there because the tension in the air, you could just feel it when you walk in when he's there. And she said out loud, I just forgot something. I'm going to go grab it and I'm going to be out of your way. That's exactly what she did. And she said, I could just tell he was saying to me, what do you want? And she said, I got my stuff. I got out and he didn't bother me after that. But I'm convinced there's my most terrifying moment probably in my life. Mm-hmm. And this is going to sound stupid, but it really was terrifying for me. We did a show a couple years ago called The Bad Seed. You ever see the movie The Bad Seed?
Oh, sure.
Yes. Well, we did the play. And it was closing night and everybody was getting all their stuff. And when we close, we all go out in the lounge and we have a final celebration and just, cake and all that stuff just to say, great show, blah, blah, blah. Well, everybody had gotten their stuff. Everybody was out in the lounge. And I, being the person that I am, I'm shutting off the lights and shutting off this and getting all my stuff. And Robert's the other manager at the theater, and he and I like to mess with each other a lot. And I had turned off the lights, came out of the dressing room, and I had just turned the corner, and something like ran up on me like a football player getting ready to tackle me. It didn't touch me, but it ran up. It ran up behind me to the point where I could feel it over my shoulders. And I screamed and I took off running and I was like, Robert! And I got to the bottom of the ramp and I turned and looked and nothing was there. So I was so frustrated. I got out there to the house and Eric was standing there talking to Sean and they both looked at me and said, what? And I said, where's Robert? And they said, he's in the box office. And that's when I realized I was back there alone. Something had chased me, and I mean chased me from backstage. Scared the shit out of me, excuse me.
Well, wait a minute. So you continue to go to this theater.
I do.
Knowing there's something there and unhappy and chasing you around, terrifying you.
Well, I don't go backstage by myself. Okay. But at the same time, I do, I try to talk out loud and say, this is what I'm doing. This is what this, and I'll tell you, Robert, every night we leave the theater, it's like a ritual. Every single night he says, good night. You stay here. Have a good evening. I'm going home. And it sometimes it follows him home, but for the most part, it stays there.
Have you guys ever left video cameras or audio recorders overnight to see what happens?
There's one person we know of that's left an audio recorder, but it was only during a rehearsal. And actually this is in the book. It's really cool. They decided to do on a break. They decided to go upstairs and do some ghost hunting. So they went up, they were up there for like 30 minutes and they didn't find anything. I don't remember. It was 30 minutes, an hour or something like that. Nothing was happening. They were getting nothing. So they left the recorder upstairs in the wardrobe room. And they went back downstairs, did their thing. And it was a husband and wife that were, I think the one was the drummer. And they were coming back upstairs to get the recorder before everybody was leaving for the evening. And they had some kind of a hearty laugh on the stairs where they were laughing at each other or doing something fairly loud. And they get upstairs, they get the recorder, nothing eventful happens. They go home and the next day she decides to listen to the recording. Well, nothing. She gets to the point where she hears herself laughing. And the next thing you hear in the recorder is, they're coming. And then it turns off. Crazy, right?
Yeah. Wow. So something was aware, and then it turned it. Wow. That is pretty intriguing.
Well, and that's what I told Robert. I was like, if we can get our hands on that recording, because I don't have a copy of the recording. Robert has heard it. I haven't heard it. But I want to get my hands on the recording so that we can share that as evidence, because the story's documented, but I want to have evidence with it, because that is a super cool story.
All right. So talk to me about, we've talked about the little girl looking for a playmate.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the creepy red-eyed shadow man watching from backstage,
mm-hmm.
the thing that chased you. What about these mists that have been known to appear out of nowhere?
That's just, I physically saw one with my eyes. I think it was 2000, was it last year? I was rehearsing my lines in the lounge while they were running a scene on the stage. And I'm walking around, and for me, when I'm running my lines, I'm saying them out loud, la, 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 la. And I happened to look up in the doorway out into the lobby, and this white mist was walking past. And when I say walking, it's more floating past. And it had to be 7 feet tall. It was huge. And it just went by and disappeared right into the curtains that lead to the upstairs. And I went flying into the house to tell Robert, and he had just seen the exact same thing on the stage 15 minutes earlier. So that's the white mist that I saw.
Right. Now, are other people witnessing and seeing this, or is Nikki Folsom completely batshit crazy and the only one experiencing these things, Nikki?
Everybody sees it. Well, and I'll tell you, I think, I'm trying to remember which, because there's so many stories, but I think it was the cast of The Birds that saw this, but Robert kept seeing a black mist look out from like the wait station from when it was, the wait station from when it was a dinner theater. He kept seeing this black mist look out, and they were rehearsing. He wasn't going to say anything to the cast until they started seeing it themselves. And it was moving through the back of the theater. So they all saw it. Every single person in the cast saw it. So it's not just me.
Nice cover. No way to verify or validate that, but I'll take your word for it this time.
Well, and Ashton one time was rehearsing with Johnny, another friend of ours. They were rehearsing choreography for one of the shows, and they were both. I think Johnny was on the ground and Ashton was on the stage, because sometimes it's easier to learn that way when you're watching somebody in front of you. And both of them saw this black mist in the doorway that comes in the house from the lobby. And they said that both of them described it in two separate stories. I talked to both of them separately. And both of them described it the same way. It was this black mist, but it had like a smoky aura, if that makes any sense. But it just like, this was the black mist, but it was like smoky on the edges of it. Weird. Really weird.
All right. All of these people having these experiences, a couple of scratches, some bruised arms, but has anybody ever been so frightened that they just will not return to this theater?
Not that I know of. But Dave, here's the crazy thing, and tell me if this is normal. We have people that have spent years at this theater that have experienced nothing. Just nothing. Like Celie, a friend of ours, Celie, she spent, I can't even tell you how many hours in that theater, and nothing has ever happened to her. Garrett's the same way. Nothing's ever happened to him, and they're just like, okay, sure. I'm like, no, it really happens. But here's the other thing. If you go looking for it, you're not going to find it. You're not going to find it. But
it's always when you're not expecting it.
Yes. And it's always when it happens, you have to stop and think, is this really happening at the moment? Because you don't think it's an experience until after it's done, and then you're like, oh, okay.
It's astounding that you've got all of this activity taking place in a location like this. And I'm curious what your thoughts are. Why would a theater be so crazy haunted? Because, you know, I've done work for TV shows doing some research and location scouting, and it's fascinating to me how many theater companies are haunted. Is it because of the energy and the applause, the laughter, the love of the audience drawing energy in? Do you think it's the entertainment value? You know, spirits are wandering about and they're like, hey, at least we can go catch a show at the Harlequin. I mean, why do you think that they're over there?
You know, I don't think it's, it's the love of ghosts. I do believe it's the energy, because anytime you're on that stage or you're watching something, I mean, the actors on that stage, I don't care how, I don't care if you're a volunteer or if you're getting paid millions of dollars a year, you're pouring your emotion out on that stage, whether it's happy or sad or angry, you're pouring it out, and the audience is receiving it and they're processing it and they're giving back, and the applause is part of it, but the emotion doesn't stop. And, the 2-hour show stops, but everybody goes home. That emotion still stays there. That energy is still there. You put it out there in the universe. So I believe it stays there because of that. And I believe that some of the people that were there, maybe from the bars when it was an NCO club, there's people that are there from those types of situations, of bar fights or, whatever it could have been. Who knows?
Yeah, that's the fascinating aspect of this, right? To have this happen. Now, are there ever times when you're in the middle of performing, when you see things moving about the catwalks or maybe even in the audience that appear to be ghostly in nature?
I remember one time I was on stage that had nothing to do with a ghost, and I was distracted by a moth in the lights, but that's just me. I do know that, that's kind of how I am. I remember one time we were I think Sean and I were in the audience, and Robert was in the light booth. I can't remember what the show was. I know Jen Harris was on stage, and we saw the curtains open, or the curtains opened like somebody was coming through them, like one of the cast members was coming through them, and they weren't supposed to come through them. So Robert went back to not yell at them, but tell them, don't go out those curtains, and nobody was near them. They were in the back. So I don't know if anybody's seen, I know that people have seen the Shadow Man backstage, but the most recent, when I was finishing the book, when I was like just finishing everything, I don't remember the name of the show, but one of the most recent shows that finished, the entire cast saw the Shadow Man at different times, at stage left and the back, and all of them were skeptics. They all saw it throughout or during the show, but it wasn't when they were on stage. It was when they were backstage getting ready to go on or coming off. They all saw him.
Yeah, it might be time for you to just, build a barn like Mickey and Judy and put a show on in a barn. It's time to leave the haunted Harlequin behind.
Well,
I don't.
It's interesting because we're a family, and I think the patrons that come in, everyone that comes in, we're kind of a family, and we support each other. And I think it's like we're just stronger than that. And if the energies want to stay and watch the shows, which they do because they like the 50s music is what they like the most. 50s music and murder mysteries is when they're the most active. But
do you get special rates if you're the undead?
You get to see for free. We don't know you're there. Come on in.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. Well, no wonder people are hanging out in your damn theater. It's free for the out of body, if you will.
That's right. You sit anywhere you want. Now, let me ask you this, because this is interesting. And maybe it's just because it's my first book, and you've interviewed thousands of people. So tell me, when people write books, does activities tend to pick up around them when they're doing it?
Yes.
Okay.
In a lot of cases, it does. They'll start to have it. Some of them have talked about it kind of working cathartically in the opposite direction. The more they write about it and share, the less the activity happens.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So I guess it kind of depends. If you feel like you're purging the demons, or are you giving them the stage that they are so greatly seeking?
Well, and I think that's it. I think for this one, we're giving them a voice, and I think that's probably why that Shadow Man was showing himself. The only reason I was asking is because as I was writing this, Eric and I were sitting in the living room, and Ashton was upstairs we were talking about what I was going to do and how far along I was, and we could hear something moving around in the kitchen, and we both looked at each other. Back to talking. It started moving again. So we got up, checked the kitchen. Nothing was moving. Nothing was bad. And I barely sat down, and Eric says, "Finish your damn book." So, but
he's a keeper, that one.
But it was interesting because Robert started noticing things happening more, and like he would call me after we would. One night I left the theater, and he and I were talking about stories I was going to put in the book, and right after I left, he called me and he was like, "Oh my God, the voices are happening and people are moving stuff around upstairs and I can hear people walking around. I'm the only one here." So it's interesting.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Exciting stuff. I'll have to make a visit out to Texas.
Yeah.
And spend some time investigating the Harlequin with you. Will you stay backstage with me alone in the dark?
I will.
All right. Check out the book, The Haunted Harlequin Theater, Ghostly Experiences Behind the Scenes. We'll have a link up for that on our website. Nikki Folsom, our guest. Nikki, I look forward to seeing you in September when we go out to haunted merry old England to investigate all the strange oddities there are to be found there.
Yes, I can't wait. Everybody needs to go because it might inspire them to write a book. You never know.
Exactly. And we've still got some spots open in our August trip. So if you want to come on out for the British invasion first wave, along with Neil Story and myself, as we investigate claims of the paranormal at haunted castles and jails, we're going to visit very historic sites following in the trail of Jack the Ripper, Robin the Hood. We'll be going out to Nottingham and Sherwood Forest. We're going to be visiting Hogwarts, the castle they used for the Harry Potter series. And just going to have an amazing time. And tickets are still available. There's a few spots open. If you'd like to come on out with us, the cost of admission gets you into all of these great locations, gets you your tour guide, Neil Story, the historian and author. It also gets you a hotel every night. It gets you breakfast and dinner every day. So it's an amazing opportunity and the adventure of a lifetime. You can find information at darknessevents.com. Tomorrow, we're back. Timothy Renner is our guest. Historical accounts of Bigfoot, wildmen, and monsters. Timothy Renner right here on the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness.